Hi guys. As promised, I'm gonna share my testimony. I've tried to do this video so many times, and it appears that my phone only holds so much, so I'm gonna have to try and shorten this as much as possible. It might have to be 2 videos, but I'm gonna try and stick it to one. I'm gonna start with the earliest memory, which is when I was 3. I think I was 3. I was in hospital. I had just had open heart surgery and I was in hospital for a week. I came home and I remember Lee and Anne, which are my biological parents. I never call them mom and dad. Anne and Lee beat me bad, and I remember Lee throwing me against the wall, and the reasoning was because I couldn't do anything myself. To be honest, I shouldn't have had to do anything because I just had major heart surgery and I was 3 years old. I mean, what 3-year-old is totally independent? But then my next memory is when I was 4 years old and it was my first day at school, and I'd never been there before, and I was scared and I didn't want to be left in a room full of strangers. And when Anne tried to leave me, I started to cry, and my teacher was like holding on to me, and like she was trying to comfort me and stuff, and I did like stay there, I think half a day or something. But when I went home, when Lee got home from work, and told him about what had happened and stuff, and he was so angry. He was beating me, and then he told me that he needed to make me into a woman, and that's when he raped me. That was the first time that he raped me. I'm sure that he was molesting me before then, but it was the first time that he raped me, and I still remember, like, when I talk about it, it doesn't affect me as much because I've talked about it so much. Obviously I still get the feelings, and I can still see it in my head, but it doesn't like upset me as much anymore because I've talked about it that much, but I still feel the pain. Like, it was painful. I was so small, and I was a child, and I shouldn't have had to put up with that, but I did. Anyway, the sexual abuse continued, and so did the physical abuse, and I have a scar right here. You can't tell. It goes from here down to about here, I think. It's gotten smaller. It used to go right across here, but it's just like here now. You can't really see this bit. But I always wear foundation on my face even when I'm at home, but I don't really use much when I'm just at home. I only cover like this part of my face because I just don't want people seeing it. But Anne did that. She had a kitchen knife and she cut my cheek because she wanted to prove how ugly I was, and she told me that I would never have anyone love me, and no one would ever love me, no one would ever want me. And that was their main message, you know, to make me feel worthless, and like I had no self-esteem. I still don't really, but I often, like, the devil often reminds me of what Anne and Lee told me, and I often do feel worthless, and like I don't deserve people that love me. And I know that's not true. I know it's not true. But anyway, the next thing after that is probably the trafficking, which started when I was 9. I remember the first time, and even though I've talked about it so much, it still upsets me because I remember how frightened I was, and I remember knowing what was going to happen to me. I remember, like, Anne and Lee took me, and I remember seeing the men outside the house that the trafficking was happening in, and I remember, like, I was 9 years old, but I still knew what was gonna happen. I still knew that they were gonna hurt me, but I walked up the path. I wouldn't get out of the car at first, and then Lee was threatening me. So I got out the car and I was walking up the path to the door, and the men that were stood outside, they were smoking, and I remember seeing the smile on their face. It was the same smile as what Lee always had on his face, and I knew. That just proved what I already knew. I tried to run away, but Lee had a tight grip on my hand, on my arm, and I remember walking in and I saw the mattresses on the floor, and it was the mattresses were all stained, and I just remember crying. I just remember crying so hard, and Lee slapped me across my face and told me to grow up, but the tears wouldn't stop. I looked around the room and I saw all of these men. There was like more than 10 men there, and I just knew. I knew that I was gonna be raped. And they pushed me down on the bed and they all took turns, and that memory is the hardest one from the trafficking, because I remember how scared I was, and that was the only time that I let myself in the room. The other times I would, like, my mind would take me somewhere else, you know. I would often think, and this is gonna make me sound crazy, I know, but I would often, like, my mind would often take me to this imaginary family that I had created in my head. And I always wanted this family. And I always wanted a mom to love me and a dad that would protect me. But that's where my brain would take me. And that first time it didn't happen, and I remember everything. I remember every man. I remember every word that they said. And this didn't just happen once. This happened for years. This happened until I was, like, almost 19. So 10 years I was being trafficked. And there was other children there all the time, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't save them. I couldn't do anything. But anyway, At one point, I was staying with Lee's friend, Charlie. He was involved in the trafficking. I don't know why I stayed with Charlie, and I don't know how long, but I stayed there. He has 2 grandchildren. And he had a room that was black walls and red lights. And there was 2 doors in that room, opposite to each other. The first door you walked in, and you was in the black wall room. And I would be locked in there for maybe half an hour or so. And all the time that I was in there, I'd like hear children crying or men. You can just imagine, but they would, when they opened the door, the room had a black floor and a red circle on the floor. And the red circle had lights, candles around the floor, around the circle. And I'm not going to go into detail about this because it's still really hard to remember, but I know now that it was satanic, and the things that they did in there was worse than, the normal trafficking. I'm not going to go into detail, I don't think I need to, but I've done a lot of research into satanic ritual abuse, because I told Catherine a bit about the things that I've recently been remembering, and she told me it was satanic. So I looked into satanic ritual abuse, and everything that they did to me is there. So I know that the Satanists, I don't know, it's just really hard to remember, but in 2010 I was taken into care, which is like the foster care system in England, and I was in there for I was in foster care from 2010 to 2015, and within that space of time, Annan Lee wasn't prosecuted. I was still seeing Annan Lee, blah blah blah. Well, in 2000, in 2012, was it 2000? Yeah, in 2012, Anne had a baby girl. She kept the pregnancy a secret, and she had a baby girl. They kept her locked in a room in the house. And trust me, I wanted to tell people. I wanted to tell people that there was a baby in that room, in that house, that was being harmed, but I couldn't. They told me that they'd kill her, and I couldn't have that. I knew they would. I knew they'd kill her. So I went there more or less every day. Every chance that I got, I went to Anne's house, and I fed the baby. I called her Lily. Anne called her It. She didn't have a name, so I called her Lily. And I'm not going to go into detail about this because it's still really painful, but in 2014 they killed her because I went into the room and I saw she was badly beaten. She had broken bones, and I tried to take her out the house. and I wasn't fast enough, so they killed her. And they're such sick people. They chopped her body up, and they chopped her body up, and they made me dig holes for her body. And I've never told anyone about this until this year. This year was the first time that I've ever told anyone that Lily even existed. But I'm trusting God that her body or whatever will be found one of these days, and I know that she's in heaven with God now, and I just can't imagine how much fun she's having. She's safe, and that brings me peace. It really brings me peace. But those same woods, well, it was a field next to the woods that her body is buried. There was woods right next to that field, and while I was in Charlie's house, this is another thing that I've just started to remember. While I was in Charlie's house, he would take me by his car to the woods. As we was getting closer to the woods, he would count from either 10 or 5. And then he'd expect me, sometimes he expected me to jump out the car while it was moving, and sometimes he would stop the car and he would tell me to get out. And when that happened, I would have to run into the woods. And it was pitch. I'm gonna start crying again. It was pitch black in those woods because it was nighttime and I couldn't see anything. And there was people coming out left and right. And if I was caught, they would rape me. And every time they raped me, they would take a piece of clothing. Sometimes it was just one shoe. And next time it would be a sock. But it would eventually get down to me being completely naked and running around in those woods. And there would be dead children hanging from the trees, and I knew that if I even tried to fight, they would kill me. But when I got back in the car with Charlie, he would act like nothing has happened. He wouldn't give me any clothes. I would have to sit there with nothing on, and his hands would always be all over me. It's just, sometimes I think about everything that I've been through and I don't know how I survived. I don't know how. I mean, those woods were awful. Out of everything, apart from Lily, out of everything, those woods are what disturbs me the most. I mean, I could be running around those woods for like 2-3 hours, and probably longer, and people would be coming out of every direction, and they would rape me. I had nothing. I had nothing. I couldn't do anything. I wasn't strong enough, but that's basically what my childhood was like. It was one torture after another torture. I'm sorry that I'm going back and forth, but it's hard to put things in chronological order. When you're, when it's just hard to talk about. But Lee made me pregnant. Well, I'm guessing it was Lee. It could have been any of the men. And Anne was pregnant at the same time. And it was November 2011 that I found out that I was pregnant. In December, Lee found out, and on New Year's Day, I can't remember if it was New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, I miscarried. Well, he killed the baby. He was kicking me, he threw me against the wall. It's hard to think about that too, but anyway, that's my childhood, if you can even call it that. But God first met me, like really met me, in 2015. I did a blog, like my Twitter is all about raising awareness for sexual abuse. I feel like that's the calling that God has on my life, to help children that have been through similar to me. And I did a blog and they interviewed me. It wasn't my blog, it was someone else's, and they interviewed me and they asked me questions about my childhood and I answered. And it finally went live in February and I tweeted it out. And I had so many positive responses from it. Like people I didn't know were responding to it, saying how brave I was and that they were praying for me and everything else. And I didn't know God then. Anyway, Catherine commented on the blog itself and then tweeted me. And out of all of the people that commented and tweeted, she was the one that I was drawn to out of everyone. And anyway, we went back and forth, and ever since that day we haven't gone I don't think we've gone one day without communicating in some way. She realized how much danger I was in. I didn't need to tell her everything, I just told her the basics, and she knew that I needed to get out of the country. By April the same year, I was on a plane to America. April 21st. I had a visa, I had a passport, but social services knew that I was coming out here and they was totally against it. They wanted me back with Anne and Lee. They didn't want me to have a new life. So, when I reached LAX, which is the airport that I flew into, I was stopped by customs, which didn't surprise me because it was the first time that I was flying into America, and I'd already been warned by Catherine about customs over here and stuff. But they was questioning me, and I looked around and I saw other people being questioned, and they wasn't being questioned as intense as I was. I gave them Catherine's number, and the customs guy called, but I couldn't listen to the conversation. He told me to go sit where I was before, and when I was called back, he said, okay, now tell me the real reason you're in America. Now, I was freaking out because I thought that Catherine had told him about the plan of asking for asylum, and she didn't. after conversations that I had with her since that point, she didn't tell customs about the plan of asylum. So I asked for asylum. He was about to send me back to my country because I wasn't answering his questions. And so I said, look, I can't go back to my country. I want asylum. So they detained me. Not just for one day, but for 14 months. I had to go to court and fight my asylum case. My asylum was denied in around October 2015. And then I was given a 40,000 bond to be released from jail. Now that was the only way to get out. So I had to stay in jail until June 28th of this year, and I was released. God showed us a path that we could go down to pay the bond, and we did. But my case isn't secure yet. There's other paths that I can take. I'm running out of time on this video, and it's going to cut me off shortly, so I don't have enough time to really go into the detail. But while I was in jail, I met God. Like, Catherine would always talk to me about God when I was in England, and I would just dismiss it. I'd be like, no, I'm not listening to that. You know, I don't believe that. But it was in music, the detention center that I was in. It was a jail, really. That's when I saw God move. Like, I saw him in such big and mighty ways, like powerful ways. And I can't believe how many, I've started writing a list of how many times that God has really shown himself in my life since I've known him. And the list is so long. And I'm so thankful that he's increased my faith. Every time I start doubting or whatever, he increases my faith 2 times more than my doubts. And it was in September 2015 that I accepted Christ as my Savior. So it's just over a year. And he has changed my life. I mean, when I was back in England, I was suicidal, I was self-harming, I was like anorexic. I still have those tendencies right now, like the eating tendencies. When I'm stressed, I cut out my eating and stuff. I have got a lot better than I was. But the self-harming's gone. I haven't self-harmed in probably almost 2 years. Yeah, it'll be 2 years in April. I haven't self-harmed. And I still have suicidal thoughts, but God deals with that. I haven't told anyone that I've had suicidal thoughts recently, but that's a different story. I don't need to. I know that I'm not going to do anything, and I know that God has me. So, he started healing me in ways that I never thought I'd be able to be healed in. And the flashbacks are still bad. People don't realize how bad the flashbacks can get. Because sometimes I can function still, even though I see it in my head, I can still function, and people don't recognize that I'm having a flashback. But then there's other days that I just stay in bed and I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything, I can't do anything. And I know people get angry about it, but I can't help it. I mean, I pray about it, I pray and pray and pray it through, but sometimes they're just too hard. I've been through a lot, and I don't say that lightly. I mean, I don't want sympathy or anything, but I want people to recognize that this isn't easy for anyone that's been through similar to me or the same as me. It's not it's not a quick fix, you know. It's not something that you can wake up one morning and say, oh, I'm fixed. It's not like that. But if you know God, then he heals you. Like, by the stripes on Jesus' back, we are healed. And that's not just physical healing, that's mental, emotional, spiritual, everything. He's a healer, he's the top psychologist, physician, everything. And I mean, the biggest thing for me was the forgiveness. I mean, I forgive Anne and Lee for what they do. That doesn't mean that I think it's right or that it should have happened or that I even blame myself anymore, because I did go through a stage of blaming myself for what they did. But I forgive them because God forgives me. And if God can forgive me of all the stuff that I've done, then I should be able to forgive them. I'm not talking to them again, and I'm not gonna have any contact with them again, but I forgive them. And that was a big healing in my life, when I really did forgive them, when I did like hand over everything to God. That was a big healing in my life. And I mean, people was telling me all the time that I needed to forgive, and I was like, how can I forgive these people when they've hurt me so much? Not just me, but my sister and the other children that are involved in these trafficking houses. How can I forgive? But I saw that, like, the scripture, there was so many scriptures in the Bible of how God forgives us. And I was like, okay, God's showing me that if he can forgive me of everything that I've done, and if he can forgive, even if Anne and Lee like repented of their sins and asked for forgiveness, God would forgive them. And I needed to remember that. I need to remember that every day. Because I have a battle with the devil every day, just like the rest of us. But I want to thank God for where I am right now. And I'm going to start crying, but it's not a sad cry. It's just thankfulness, because I finally